Got here an 83 Wanderlodge PT40, and the complaint is when I drove this thing home after we bought it, power steering was good until it returned to idle. So you're coming towards a stop, torque converter clutch is still engaged to get higher engine RPMs. That releases, engine goes back to idle, you go to make your turn into an intersection and you don't have very much power steering pressure. So I've been looking around to try and find a power steering filter. Thought maybe that's clogged up. This is your power steering reservoir. I've got a couple filters in there. That will come back to that. This is the one filter that was in there that I pulled out of there. And let's see if you can see this. Yeah, see all them little metal flakes in there? That's not a good sign. Well, anyway, that's a different problem, I'm sure. We're going to have to figure out. Inside that reservoir, you've got this filter. There's a rod that comes up through the filter, and there's a hole in that rod. So anyway, crank this down or whatever, oil flows up through the rod and it's got a hole in it. Oil enters the inside of the filter and flows out of it, or out through these holes and passageways. What I'm essentially trying to do is add a second filter on top here. I actually looked up this filter by size. There's a bigger hole in the bottom, smaller hole there. I flipped this over because the oil enters through the tube, and I took a second filter and put it on top because that tube, well, it's pretty small like this, so my hope is that oil flows through that hole, through that rod, into this filter, and if there's extra pressure, it can then go up around and seal on the other opposing filter, and then it'll have a small hole on the top that will cap it up. Anyway, the problem is, in doing so, you run out of space. So I'm going to modify a bolt right here. But the problem you run into is when you put this bolt in here, now you're too tall after the cap goes, or the lid goes on the top of this reservoir. So I'm going to cut that bolt down, and we'll get a little extra length. And I believe the spring pressure is there in case this filter's ever completely clogged or whatever, and that pressure can push up on the spring and relieve itself. So I think that spring is still essential. I saw in the newer Wanderlodges, just a little bit newer than this, they have 3 filters, and this is a taller canister to accommodate those. So I'm going to try add 2. Let's see if we can make that work. Alright, now we got 2 filters in there. That was a 5-inch bolt. I just cut that much off of it. This is what the original one was, with one filter and the spring. I just reused the same spring. It's a little bit more compressed than it was, so it's got a little bit more pressure on it, but I think it'll be fine because now we got twice the filters, so that'll help relieve a little restriction. There's the cover. If you guys want to know the filter number, that's your Napa Gold number, and that's the filter that came out of here. It did have a number on here, but ain't readable no more, so let's just get her put back together. And one last thing, because I put this filter in here and this cover goes on the top of here, this goes in and that's your dipstick to check your fluid level. Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to trim a little off this dipstick, probably about halfway between the add and the full. Just trim that off so you'll still be able to see where it is when it's full, because otherwise this runs into that, and we'll just trim a little off and that'll be fine. I think the gain we're getting out of this is worth it, so enjoy!